This is classic tough justice, meted out as it's been for centuries, and still is in much of the world today. Though some countries have found less lethal ways to dispense it. From corporal punishment to a lifetime alone behind bars. Yet there is another side of justice that seeks to change criminal behavior rather than crush it. An idea that flourishes in Europe and is spreading to North America. Here in Canada, we are pulled in both directions by tough new ideas about prisons filtering across our southern border and softer ideas from across the sea. But which voices should we listen to?
The chain gangs, they're great. I put them right on the main drag.
Make this law as simple as you can. 3 strikes and you're out. And if they can't count to 3, we got a problem.
In Japanese prison, discipline and order, it's the most important thing in prison life. Good behavior in prison is maybe good behavior in community.
People have this preconception that murderers are monsters, that they're people without a face. Well, this is a face. And this is the face of a murderer.
Isn't that the story everywhere you go in Canada? Soft on crime, soft on crime. What's the deterrent?
Which way will Canada go? Which way should we go? At its root, the choice is always the same: to punish offenders severely or to try to integrate them back into the community, to take revenge or to rehabilitate, to kill or to cure. China, an ancient country that clings to ancient customs, including the harsh punishment of crime that much of the world has abandoned. China is the world's leading executioner, killing more people than all other countries combined. People are put to death for murder, bank robbery, or even political corruption. Justice may come within days of a trial, often with a bullet in the head. The Chinese government calls this policy "strike hard," and it's killed tens of thousands of people in the last 20 years. Before that, under Mao, China's crime rate stayed low, partly because there wasn't much worth stealing. Then in the 1980s, China's economy began to take off, and Beijing started to look like capitalist Hong Kong. The new wealth attracted a sudden flood of crime. And so Strike Hard was born. Massive police crackdowns that arrest tens of thousands and kill many. This harsh policy is based on strong fears, says a leading expert on Chinese justice.
Many Chinese leaders fear that they are sitting on top of a powder keg, that social order is not a natural thing in Chinese society, and if they don't take strong measures to fight crime on a regular basis, that social order could easily degenerate into chaos.
To instill fear, the accused are paraded in the streets before they're put to death. Hundreds of people have been killed at once. The policy is known locally as kill the chicken to scare the monkey. Kill a stupid criminal to scare a smart one. Last year, the U.S. executed 66 people, but China put to death at least 3,000, according to its own figures, about 10 times as many per capita. And most of the country seems to support it. An independent survey found that 97% of the population supports the death penalty and tough justice.
Many criminals should get the death penalty. And even that's not enough compensation for their crimes.
In jail, he is still a living person, but the person he's killed is dead. The family will say, "Why are you living when you have killed somebody?"
If you rob a bank, you will get the death sentence. Such laws will help reduce crimes.
China's had the death penalty for a long time. Kill someone and you pay with your life. It's not possible to escape death.
In China, you can be executed for dozens of different crimes. And some scholars are starting to speak out against the scale of these killings. Liu Renwen is a noted Beijing criminologist. He says that strike hard is damaging China's reputation.
China's socialist system is so beautiful. So we should value our people's life much higher than the Western capitalist system countries. But the reality is not so.
Li Yue-Qing lives in a Beijing apartment with her son. They can't afford meat or even tea since her husband was arrested during an anti-crime campaign. He was at work when a co-worker was found dead nearby. And Li says local police were so eager to make an arrest, they tortured her husband to sign a confession.
They hit him. They hit his hands until they became swollen and he could not eat. They do not care if he did it. They only want to close the case.
Li struggled through China's court system and managed to keep her husband alive. But he seems likely to remain in prison for decades. China's high-speed justice leads to many cases of injustice, say critics, and it doesn't even reduce crime.
Even the official statistics will show that strike hard campaigns don't work over the long run or even the short run. That almost immediately after the campaign is concluded, that crime trends go back to where they were before. This simply pushes them to launch more of these campaigns, but there's no evidence from their own statistics that they are having any long-term effect in gaining control over crime.
Liu Renwen has told authorities that overusing the death penalty will hurt the government.
Once you execute people, you have a bomb. Because their friends, their relatives, their family, they have no good feelings to the Communist Party, to your government. If you execute too many people, too many bombs, too dangerous to your government.
Li Yue-Qing may be a time bomb in the making, but for now, she just wants to keep her husband alive. And even she can't imagine a China without strike hard.
Strike hard is correct. The death penalty is also correct. Real criminals should receive these punishments. But my husband is not a criminal.
China isn't rare in using draconian penalties. Executions and harsh punishments are ancient forms of justice, and they're still with us. The UN says half the countries in the world still execute and torture, firing squads in Liberia, to crucifixions in Sudan. In Saudi Arabia, there are beheadings and amputations. In Iran, men are flogged in public for crimes like blasphemy or disturbing the peace. Some are even stoned to death. These cruel methods are meant to make criminals pay and to deter others. But Western countries are not as distant from these methods as we might think. 2 centuries ago, England and France were stretching criminals on the rack, or drawing and quartering them. Quebec branded people for their crimes until the 1800s, while prisoners at Kingston Penitentiary were whipped, but only 39 times, in accordance with a supposed commandment by Moses. Harsh punishment has a long history in the West, and while it's become less brutal, we still haven't entirely escaped it, even in the world's most advanced country. This is Pelican Bay, an American supermax prison on a remote part of California's coastline. It's as tough as prison gets in a country which has decided the only answer to crime is to lock people up. There are 2 million prisoners in America, a country that has now become the world's largest jailer. And the people here are said to be the worst of the worst. It's a shadow world, out of sight and out of mind from the rest of the country. Prisoners here are kept in their cells 23 hours a day, alone. Some will spend their whole lives in a small chamber where they never see the sun. It's today's Alcatraz, a high-tech system with armed guards at a central control who watch every prisoner's movement every moment of the day. Prisoners don't even have eye contact with each other. To communicate, they shout from cell to cell. They even play chess this way. By law, everyone must be allowed out of their cell 1 hour a day for exercise. But even this is done indoors and alone. Most of these men are violent offenders, serving life sentences. The warden says that part of the reason they're shut away is to protect them from each other.
Many of the individuals we have here are very sophisticated. Perfectly working handcuff can be slipped by some of these individuals. So all of a sudden you have a person that you thought you had restrained and they're no longer in restraints and able to act against officers or other inmates.
This man's been here 22 years and calls himself Double Life Godzilla because he's serving 2 life terms for murders he committed in jail.
I killed one of my cellies in New Folsom, and then 2 guys ran in my cell in this prison, and one went out brain dead 2 days on life support machine. I killed both of them without weapons, from bare hand.
There are constant searches for dangerous weapons. The only time most prisoners are in human company. Many here have the same fear.
Losing touch with reality, losing touch with being a human being. I don't want to make it seem like I'm having psychological problems, but there's always that constant fear that that is going to come after being here for so long. Everything you do is through these doors, through these little holes. And you'll notice after we talk for a little while, your vision will start getting distorted. When you're looking at me, it'll look like you got on some of those old 3D glasses or something. And this is how we spend our days. This is, you know, so you can imagine after 10, 15, 20 years of this, 5 years of this, I suppose, what it would do to one's mind.
Those who study supermaxes say they're a form of psychological torture.
Some of them go mad. I've seen people in supermax confinement banging their heads against the wall, mutilating themselves, smearing themselves with feces, babbling incoherently, screaming, some of them lying in catatonic positions on the floor of their cells. This certainly doesn't happen to everyone, but it happens to an unsettlingly high number of people who get placed in these kinds of environments.
So imagine a man sitting in a cage this size for 16 years. We're a people as human beings who can fly people to the moon. We're a people as human beings who can write the most beautiful poetry and the most beautiful poems. As human beings, we're so advanced, but we can't find a better way to get people to assimilate into society and to act correctly according to the laws than to throw them in cages and forget about them. I mean, it doesn't say much for who we are.
I think they're too comfortable. Here they get to go to the inmate store once a month and spend $45 for candy and cookies and personal toiletry items. They also have 24-hour cable TV in their cell. They get visits. I personally would like to see them have to earn those things by showing that we're on our way to something better.
Pelican Bay's Supermax is just one of several prisons here, all built in the 1980s, when California's crime rate went up and its justice system got tough. Since then, the state's prison population has soared from 20,000 to 160,000. In fact, California has more prisoners than Canada, France, Great Britain, Germany, Japan, and the Netherlands combined. Its lower security prisons are overcrowded pressure cookers where some kind of violence happens every day. Most of these men have little to lose. Half of them are serving sentences of 25 years to life under California's 3 strikes law, the toughest part of the U.S. tough justice system. This is the man behind 3 strikes, Mike Reynolds. He helped create the law after his own daughter was robbed and murdered.
It's an indescribable, helpless feeling for a father to be able to hold his daughter's hand and watch the life just slipping away, and there's nothing you can do. Nothing. And I made a promise to her that if I couldn't save her life, I would do what I could to try to prevent this from happening to other people, other kids, other little girls.
His daughter, Kimber, was murdered by 2 men who'd been in and out of jail for years. And Reynolds wanted to pass a law to keep people like them locked up for good.
We decided to use the phrase 3 strikes because it played to the simplicity of understanding it. Make this law as simple as you can, and if they can't count to 3, we got a problem. This guy has had chance after chance after chance. Maybe it's time to give his next victim a chance.
Under 3 strikes, committing 3 serious crimes automatically sends you to jail for 25 years to life. But serious can mean everything from murder to simple theft. Take Melvin, who's serving 30 years. He claims he got his second and third strikes for the same robbery. One strike when he burgled a house, and another because he broke down the door.
I might have did something that broke the law, but at the same time, it didn't cause me to take my life away. It stopped me from having contact with my family. So I don't ever get to see my kids grow up or nothing like that. So they ready to take my life away to exchange for burglary.
But crimes like this are exactly what 3 strikes are meant to stop, say many Californians. Just ask Lieutenant Swift, our guide at the prison.
I know if my family was in my home and he kicked in the door and came in and robbed us, I would consider that a violent crime. And I would think that the 3rd strike was appropriate if he had that history.
Even if no one was hurt?
Even if no one was hurt in my family. How can you measure what psychological impact that's going to have on your children or your family, your wife and kids?
Critics say this is all cruel and unusual punishment, creating human time bombs who will eventually explode. But those who support tough justice say there's no room for sympathy if you want to make society safe.
It's a sorry testimony as to the nature of humanity that we have to have laws like 3 strikes. But until we can all go home and hold hands and sing Kumbaya, until the kind of offenders that we're talking about start responding to candlelight marches and prayer vigils, unfortunately, they laugh at us. They laugh at us because they don't respond to that. Yeah, this is a tough law, but we're talking about tough people.
Tough justice is spreading all over the U.S., with longer jail sentences, less parole, and something called no-frills prisons built to be uncomfortable. The principle is simple. The best way to stop crime is with punishment, and no one takes this idea further than Arizona. They're pushing tough justice with criminals who aren't that tough. Seems like this supposedly vanished decades ago, when most states declared chain gangs needlessly cruel. But now they've returned, along with other old-fashioned ideas about punishment. And that's how the sheriff here in Phoenix likes it.
The chain gangs. I put them right on the main drag. You think I'm going to put them in the desert where nobody can see them? Well, for what? No, I want them right up and down the main streets so the mother driving by with the kid can say, see, honey, you do something wrong. You're going to be on that chain gang.
Meet Sheriff Joe Arpaio, known as the toughest sheriff in America. Arpaio is the living incarnation of why tough justice appeals to many Americans, like the people of Phoenix. The city began to boom in the 1980s, but crime was booming too, so the nervous citizens elected Sheriff Joe to put criminals away. The sheriff's most radical idea was to stick prisoners in tent cities that now hold over 7,000 people, despite sweltering desert temperatures of 40 degrees Celsius. Everything is designed to make the inmates suffer, so they'll never commit a crime again. They spend all day building rat traps for the city. To add to the pain, they have to listen to Joe's favorite singer, Frank Sinatra, 12 hours a day. And that's not all they complain about.
It's hot. The sweat box, man. It's hot. It's cold in the wintertime.
Hot in the summer.
Hot in the summer.
Hot in the summer. You really don't eat. It's humiliating to be treated that way.
The meals are crap. We think we're cattle more times than anything, you know.
Keep touch and then you know what's going on.
Our men and women are living in tents in Afghanistan, and these guys are complaining about living in tents. I got another alternative. If they don't like the tents, we'll take them down. And we'll have foxholes. They can live in the foxholes. You like it? You keep complaining about the tents, we'll dig holes, and you can live in the foxholes. You know something? Men and women fighting for their country would give anything to live in a tent. These are Korean War tents. Korean War tents. Stop complaining about the tents.
The food is deliberately awful, since Arpaio cut them down to 2 cold meals a day.
This is brunch, 11 o'clock. We have salami because it's free. Our meals are 17 cents a meal. That's 2 meals, 35 cents. It costs more to feed our dogs.
To humiliate them more, he also has a policy on what underwear they can wear.
Look at this word, stripes. Just pink. Look at that, pink.
Pink drawers.
Pink socks. Okay. This is ridiculous. We're grown men.
They can't even write letters, just postcards, with a picture of guess who.
To send them a message when they send them to their gangbangers or whatever. That's it.
Sheriff Arpaio is no small-town cop. He runs the whole county and the 4th largest jail system in the U.S. Yet these are only local jails for prisoners sentenced to less than 2 years. Many complain they're in for minor offenses, like vagrancy and not paying traffic tickets.
You got 3 months for not the traffic?
Getting behind on my fines. That's it.
Traffic?
Yeah. That's crazy. I got 4 kids.
Why is it every time we try to ask you a question, you never get to the point, you always try to go around it and change the subject?
You know, you're the guy, you're the smart ass
Yes,
here.
I am.
You think you're from Chicago, right?
I'm an extremely intelligent person,
Chicago?
and I ask you intelligent questions.
Jailhouse lawyer?
I ask you intelligent questions.
No,
and
you don't.
answer.
Let me tell you, you don't ask me nothing. You see, you're in my jail. I asked you the question. You're going to end up in lockdown if I catch you the 3rd time. So you do one more thing, you're sarcastic crap. I have the keys for the lockdown, not you. I do. This is my hotel. I'll put you in the room I want you to.
Why?
I run this. No, because I'm the sheriff and you're the crook. Always remember that. There's a line there. Goodbye. Jesus, this guy I was very calm today.
Arpaio figures that harder time makes for less crime.
So what's wrong with punishing them and taking away their privileges? Why is everybody afraid to say the word punishment and privilege? Why does it always have to be education and rehabilitation? That's all you hear. You do something wrong, you should be punished.
Does the sheriff's system work? 2 years ago, Arpaio hired some people to study the effects of his jails. The recidivism rate was the same, and so was the crime rate. But that doesn't stop the Arizona media from covering every word Arpaio says. Tough justice sells, and Joe knows how to pitch it. He even lets reporters use his prisoners as a backdrop. In fact, Joe's prisons have made him the state's most popular politician, with an 80% approval rating. Here in Phoenix, Sheriff Arpaio is king.
I like Sheriff Arpaio. I think he's hard-nosed, but I think that if you're in prison, there's a reason.
He has good ideas, and he's tough. A lot of them are in there for reasons, and I think sometimes we're too easy on people in prisons and jails.
Even some of his inmates treat him like a star. In the land of celebrities, they want their postcards autographed by the toughest sheriff in America.
I'll tell you why we want him to sign those postcards. He's famous like that.
Yeah, they're going to be worth something when I die, right?
They're already worth something.
So world-renowned sheriff.
World-renowned.
He's like Wyatt Earp.
Famous.
Sheriff Joe's a gay person. He's a gay
Yeah.
tough justice instinctively appeals to many people, although there's no hard evidence that it works. In fact, statistics show that whatever the justice system, crime is falling all over the Western world. Nevertheless, harsh punishment is on the rise all over the U.S., and the campaign is even spilling into gentle Canada. Canadians already have a pretty tough justice system, although very few of us get a chance to peek inside. This is Kingston Pen, Canada's oldest penitentiary. Today, Kingston is still a federal maximum security prison for some of the worst of Canada's 31,000 prisoners. Inmates live better lives than they did in these same cells 150 years ago. But the amount of time they spend here is getting longer as Canada comes under the influence of U.S. justice. Prisoners here are serving what Canadian officials say are some of the longest sentences in the Western world.
There are European countries that regard long-term sentences as 4 years or more. Well, gosh, for some crimes in Canada, you're hardly getting warmed up with a sentence of 4 years. People convicted of first-degree murder in this country serve on average twice as long before release as other Western nations. 28 years in custody before release versus around 14 years.
We are especially tough on youth in Canada. 24,000 are in detention, most of them for property crimes, the second highest per capita rate in the Western world, according to legal experts.
If you compare the incarceration rates of kids in Canada and the United States, for property offenses, we incarcerate more than the United States does. For violent offenses, it's about the same. But for property offenses, we seem to have a love for locking up kids.
It's still not tough enough for many people. A growing number of Canadian politicians and police groups are pushing for harsher U.S.-style sentencing here. Led by the province of Ontario, which is modeling all its new prisons after America's recent no-frills ones. Welcome to Maplehurst Super Jail, just outside of Toronto, the largest correctional facility in Canada. There are no guard towers, just bland structures that resemble an industrial park, with lots of security. Like all new Ontario facilities, there's a U.S.-style pod system that isolates prisoners in small, Spartan cell blocks. There are no TVs, radios, or computers allowed, all things you'd find in a federal prison. Prisoners are rarely allowed outside, even to exercise.
Ontario's approach is a no-frills approach, that the time fits the crime. It's not going to be an easy time for them, and it shouldn't be an easy time for them. In many respects, in Canada, we are too soft. I think there's a philosophy at the federal level, and I think it's failed the country.
For all this security, most of these provincial prisoners are petty thieves with short sentences who stay behind bars an average of only 70 days. Ontario is building big, tough jails for small-time criminals. But Runciman says his government is trying to send Ottawa a message. It's time for more punishing Canadian prisons and longer jail sentences.
It's nice to say we're going to rehabilitate them. But what happened to old-fashioned punishment, for God's sake?
One person pushing for these changes is Teresa McQuaig, whose grandson Sylvain was kidnapped and beaten to death in a gang murder. But most of the youth convicted got off with light sentences, while the adults will be eligible for parole in 25 years. McQuaig wants much tougher American-style sentences here in Canada.
When they say to you, serving life,
It's not really true. We all know that. Very, very, very few people ever serve more than 25 years. Very, very few. The United States laugh at us. To them, we are a big joke.
Surveys show that a majority of Canadians support tougher penalties, as well as a return to capital punishment. Yet almost every criminologist you talk to in Canada or elsewhere says that dozens of studies show that tough punishment doesn't deter crime.
If you're saying we want to treat people harshly, take away their color TV, give them bologna sandwiches every day, and therefore our society will be safer, you're on thin ice. There's nothing to support that. But if that's your ideological position, that holding people to account by treating them very harshly is the way you want to go, by all means do it.
As Canada gets tough, many back in the States are starting to spurn their love affair with tough punishment. These people are trying to change California's harsh law because they have kids and friends serving life sentences. Several of these people are victims of a law they voted for, thinking it would get violent offenders off the street. But they've learned that tough laws have tough consequences. Like Sue Rodriguez, whose own son is in jail for life for nonviolent crimes.
Unfortunately, in 1994, I wasn't a very political person. I didn't know anything about 3 strikes, and I voted for this horrible law. I thought it was going to be murderers and kidnappers and rapists.
My son's got tears in his eyes, and he's saying, I didn't hurt anybody. I never raped anybody. I never robbed anybody, and I never killed anybody. Mom, how can they do this to me?
And my son's young. There are older ones who are going to have to come out of there at 70 and 80 and 90 years old if they ever get out. And what are we going to do with them? What are we going to do with them?
Almost 7 million Americans have now spent time behind bars. That's 1 in 30, and 1 in 5 blacks. Hundreds of thousands of them are released from American jails every year, creating huge social problems for themselves and society.
Don't lock up. Educate. Don't incarcerate. Don't lock up.
Many people are calling for an end to the ever-expanding U.S. prison system. But those who passed the new tough laws say they're here for good.
I'm going to take exception to mothers of criminals taking on the role of a victim. Somebody has to take responsibility here. I'm not going to allow their kid, just because it's their kid and she happens to be the mother, to go out and commit more crime and take more victims as part of that kid's therapy.
Tough justice is an age-old response that seems to satisfy public demands. From execution in China to mutilation in the Middle East to solitary confinement in the United States. It seems that harsh justice can tempt any country, although more and more evidence suggests that stopping crime is a lot more complicated than punishment.
Tough justice sounds good until you think about it. The idea that there's this very small group of bad guys, and if we can only locate them and lock them up forever, then we'll be peaceful and not have any crime. It turns out it's wrong. It just doesn't fit what we know about crime.
The United States has embraced punitive prison policy so completely that it is going to be difficult for us to turn back. I would encourage other countries to be very, very wary of emulating it in any way.
We might think that people are ignoring the fact that a lot of these forms of harsh justice don't really seem to have an effect on crime. I think that whether it be many of my fellow Americans, or whether it be many of the people I've spoken with in China, that there is a strong belief that these things are effective. And if they're not showing effectiveness now, it's simply because we haven't implemented them harshly enough. That eventually, if we stick with these policies, they will triumph over crime.
Everyone wants to live in a crime-free world, but will tough justice take us there? Prisons have huge human and financial costs. And some countries think there are better ways to make society safer. Ways that may surprise us. Next week on Witness, can criminal behavior be cured instead of crushed?